Hi everybody, Thorn for Your Heart here, Jude Inc., Ray. Just going to go ahead and start a series on some tutorials I'm creating for the BGTSCC media team and for the creators Discord. Hopefully anybody who sees these videos can gain some knowledge as to how to create content for the game itself, and hopefully pass it along so others can learn from it as well if I'm able to teach it. Um, okay, so I'm just gonna give some forewarning. I kind of create these tutorials in a very amateur form, so don't expect too much as far as some pop-ups or advertisements and stuff like that just coming out. I'm gonna try and be as simple as I can using terms that are very easy for people to understand. Considering I'm no professional at Blender, I just kind of learned as I went. So if I get some things wrong, just know that it's more likely a simple mistake. Obviously, I'm not trying to come off as some sort of Blender guru or some genius. So uh, that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and start. First tutorial we're doing here is I'm going to go ahead and place an object file, an OBJ file, onto the human head of a Neverwinter Nights 2 model. And we're going to go ahead and affix that to the head and export that as an actual hat in game. And I'll just be going over the actual texturing, preparing the textures, and placing the actual model in Blender space, and also waiting, and of course exporting in MDB. Sounds like a lot, but it'll be in segments, so just kind of be patient as we go, and we'll get it done. So what I did here is I went ahead and I got this little game ready models that I got from cgtrader.com. I'm going to take this turbine here, and we're going to use that as our preferred model to put into the game. Um, so, yeah, so what I did is I downloaded the models, and I have them all here. I went in and opened up turbine, and I just chose the white one since it'd be the easiest one to use to create a tint map out of, because you basically want your textures to be black and white, so when you create that tint map, the color can bleed through better and not have any interactions with any other color, causing some odd saturation. So what I did is I went and copied the files into here. So I'm gonna do that again just to kind of show. Replace. What I did is I created a working files folder on my desktop. Wherever you want to work from is your preference. I just chose the desktop simply because it's easiest for me to access at the moment for the sake of these videos. Normally I do keep them in a different folder, but I kind of did some cleanup here because my desktop is usually a lot more messier than this. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that working files folder that I copied them into. I don't need this downloads folder open anymore. Let's close that out. And we have the files here, Turbine. And what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to go ahead and prepare these textures. So I'm going to fire up Photoshop. And my computer might be hitting some slow computations lately. I think I just need good cleaning. So every now and then, if it may slow down a little bit, just bear with me. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is this is all the textures that came with the file. Normally, depending on where you get your files from and how you get them, some will have them already kind of put together. Considering this is more of an open source type file, it came with all the textures separated, so I kind of combined them myself. Now, the method I use isn't the right method, and saying that it isn't always the method everybody uses. It helps me create more realistic textures, just in my opinion, for the game. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to grab the base color texture, drop it in here, and this is for this turbine. So that's pretty much it. Now what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and grab the normal map, toss it right on top. And the normal map is pretty much the information that tells where light enters and exits an object. Kind of creates a depth of realism within a flat texture or a flat mesh. Now, like I said, I'm not a professional, so I can't give out the most realistic term for it. But That's what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and rasterize this layer by right-clicking on the file and click rasterize layer. Now we can edit the layer without using the smart object lock. Don't worry about that if you don't know what that means. So what I'm going to hit is Control Shift U, and that's going to desaturate the entire layer. You can also go to Image Adjustments, Desaturate, Control Shift U. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and Control L for levels, and you can also go to Image Adjustments. Well, you can't do it there, but levels. It'll take you here. I usually click Auto because it kind of finds it happy medium, and I'll go ahead and bring down the medium levels a bit just to kind of make that texture pop a little more, and then maybe bring in the highlights, the whites back in, kind of crush them in a little bit so this texture gets some really good some shadow sources in. I'm going to press OK. Then I'm going to go ahead and put that on overlay. And now, or you can try multiply if you'd like a little more darker. You can experiment actually with whichever ones you want, soft light. But I'm going to use overlay for this one right here. And I'm going to save that off as my texture. I'm going to go ahead and select both. I'm going to hit Control E to flatten the image, merge the two layers. And I'm going to hit Control Shift S. Now the reason I'm using Photoshop CS6 is because it uses the NVIDIA DDS plugin tools. I know the CC versions also have a plugin tool that you can use. I'm not sure if it's updated for that. I think it was last I heard. But for the sake of simplicity, I stick with CS6 because it's what I've trained on the most. And yeah, CC has its own pluses and minuses. Maybe later on down the line I can get into those where you can create your own normal maps within CC and such as. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this as a D3 DDS. Okay, I'm going to rename this to just BG Turbine Toot underscore D. That's very important. Underscore D. D for diffuse map. Diffuse map is what we're gonna the one of the maps that each mesh uses to as far as textures goes of the three. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and save that out. I'm gonna save it as a DXT3. Now people have their issues. People claim you can have DXT1 with no alpha. Generally, I find that I have less issues with DXT3. Now the compression is a little bit better, or not better, but I mean the DXT1 and DXT3, they have their own, and if you really got in depth you could really pull out the pluses and minuses. For the sake of simplicity in this tutorial, I'm just going to choose DXT3 and I'm going to click save. It takes a second to kind of save out, and we should have it here actually. There we go. And it's a small file, 1.33. A DD3 DDS texture really compresses an image for video game formats and stuff like that. So it's really good at compression. I'm going to do the same thing for the normal map now separately. So I'm going to bring that into its own workspace. Okay, one thing a normal map must have is an alpha channel. Now what this alpha channel does is it controls the specularity of the actual object itself. So we have the bump here, which you see where the light shines in and out. Basically the normal map tells you how much that light shines and how much it shines back. Specularity. Normally for cloth, you leave it black. The more white you add to the map, the more shine you get in the object. So if you're using like a full plate armor or some steel objects, some metal, some chrome, it's going to be really white. Considering this is a turbine, it can stay black. Now, luckily for us, we have with us here a glossiness map, which is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to place this in its own file, and you'll see what I mean. Do you see how it looks here? Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. It really doesn't have a shine to it. It's really dirty. So I'm going to copy that by hitting Control A for select all, or you can go to select all, and then go ahead and hit Control C or edit copy. And I'm going to go ahead and move it on over to the alpha channel. Now, if you're in layers, just go to channels, go ahead and click alpha 1 and hit Control V, and it should paste right into it. Now, see how it matches up right away? So basically the light's going to shine a little bit. Maybe this is like a little bit of, it used to be once like a shiny object, but it's been weathered a little bit. So some parts of it, the shinier, the lighter parts have a little bit more of a gloss to them. Now that's not a heavy gloss. So really in the Neverwinter Nights 2 engine, it's not going to make much of a difference, but we try. And just go ahead and lock that in there. I'm going to hit Control D to deselect, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that out now as a DDS file. I'm going to copy this format. Don't click it, because if you click it, one thing I found is it puts the name here, and no matter what you rename it, it overwrites it. I don't know if that's a purposed error or how, if that's just an error in the way the program works or however, but it happens sometimes, not all the time, but it's just not worth it. So I'll go ahead and click alpha channels, because now we have alpha channels introduced, whereas before we didn't. And it's very important. You also want to export with the specularity. And then if you export a map without the specularity and you put it in game, you'll see that it comes out bright white, because it automatically creates an alpha channel for it, and it makes it pure white, which is what Chrome would be, or a very shiny plate mail. So basically all the light is just shining off of it. Okay, so I'm going to rename it in the same format, but I'm going to change out the extension like this. BG turbine toot underscore in for normal map. Okay, I'm going to go and click save. Now for normal maps, I always click DXT5 with an interpolated alpha, 8 bits. And that just gives us, that makes sure our alpha channel is of good quality for the actual compression. Usually in normal maps, you don't want to use anything less than, and anything more than, actually. And so we have those two maps together. Now, you don't have to do this process first. I tend to always do that first because, well, that's a lie. I don't always do it first. It all depends on the object. But if it's something that I know what I'm going into ahead of time, it's always good just to have it. Simply because you'll have to do it eventually. If you try to export the item into game and they're not DDS or TGA target files, they won't show. These normally were, I believe, let's check. These were PNG files. Now, PNG files work for other video games, but the Neverwinter Nights 2 engine does not read PNG files at all. JPEGs, nope. Only Targas and DDS, which are standard for most video games. For a lot of video games. Okay, so now that we got those done, I'm going to try to experiment something here, because I noticed this early on. I'm going to zoom out. I want to go ahead and grab this and hit Control-C. Now, this is the fun part of just doing textures. You can always add stuff and draw onto it and imitate stuff. I'm going to go ahead and add this this specularity map right over, and I'm going to kind of play with it a little bit to see if I can get some grunginess to the actual texture itself too. So I'm going to hit like a soft light, and you see how before that, and what it's doing is it's kind of adding a little bit of grunginess to it. Overlay might give me too much, and then it starts looking a little too cartoony in game. Since it's all black, if you hit multiply, it's just going to go right over screen. It might give me the darks of it all. No, let me just go with a little bit of overlay, just lightly like that. See, now it looks like we create that more illusion of depth. I'm gonna go ahead and Control E, flatten those up, and I'm just gonna hit Control S, and it's gonna save again. I'm gonna save it as a DX3 because all diffuse maps DXD3, normal maps DXT5. Okay, save, and it's gonna overwrite. Takes a second too, and there we go. Let's go ahead and close this out for the sake of my computer's RAM. Okay, close that out. No longer need it. Close it out. No longer need it. Go ahead and exit the program. Now we got that done, so we're ready to start modeling.